Good morning, War College. Yesterday was great. We had some truly impressive keynote speakers. We had two great panels. I think the topic is right on for where we're headed in the future. I hope you have enjoyed the various meals, breakfasts. Buses have been getting there on time. But for today's keynote speaker, it's my real honor and pleasure to introduce the Secretary of the Navy. He is the 75th Secretary of the Navy. And as Secretary, he leads America's Navy and Marine Corps and is responsible for an annual budget in excess of $150 billion and almost 900,000 people. Secretary Mabus has served in a variety of top posts in government and the private sector. In 1988, he was elected governor of Mississippi. He was appointed ambassador to Saudi Arabia in 1994. Prior to becoming governor, he was elected state auditor of Mississippi. Secretary Mabus served as a surface warfare officer in the U.S. Navy aboard the cruiser USS Little Rock. Secretary Mabus is a native of Ackerman, Mississippi, and he received a bachelor's degree from the University of Mississippi, a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University, and a law degree from Harvard Law School, excuse me. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Mabus. Right there.
Thanks. Admiral Christensen, thank you so much for that introduction. I see a lot of friends in the audience. This was my first speech as SECNAV 2 years ago, and I didn't know anybody in this group. Today, I see a lot more faces that I recognize and some that are even friendly. I know that we have a former Secretary of the Navy, Secretary Middendorf, here somewhere. Okay. And we have members of the Secretary of the Navy's advisory panel, the SNAP, that's doing a lot of work on energy and other pretty important topics. Jerry Green, Virginia Kamsky, Maurice Sonnenberger sitting here in the front row. And my Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, Installations, and Environment, EIE. If we can find an IO to go with that. Jackie Fannin-Steele, who's doing a remarkable job. I'm really happy to be here at the War College. One thing that Admiral Christensen did not say was my ship was homeported here in Newport on the pier right down the way from the War College. And I spent a lot of time in Newport 40 years ago looking at the War College and being pretty envious of the intellectual pursuits that went on in here. We've had a couple of anniversaries this week. This weekend was the 69th anniversary of the Battle of Midway. And on the 6th was the 67th anniversary of D-Day. So many of the leaders of those two battles, which turned the tide of World War II and of history, were educated here at the War College. So much of the doctrine that came to fruition during World War II first germinated here at the War College. This is a crown jewel of educational institutions, not just for the United States, but around the world. And the future leaders of our armed forces and the armed forces of the world are educated here. I had this point brought home to me. We got back, the folks that travel with me, and I flew in here last night. We've been to Liberia, Angola, Ghana, and Spain. 6 days. It was a pleasure trip. But I was in Ghana, and the CNO there introduced me to one of his staff, a flag officer who wore the crest of the War College on his uniform. He was a graduate of here. And every CNO that I met with in those 3 West African countries and in Spain will be here for the International Sea Power Symposium in October, which brings together more than 100 CNOs from around the world. This institution, the bonds of friendship and professionalism that it fosters, that it establishes, the debates that it encourages, the intellectual rigor that it pursues, creates a far better atmosphere for the world, and it creates a far stronger United States Navy and Marine Corps. Now, while I was on this trip, I got to do what I like to do best in this job, and that's visit with sailors and Marines, particularly forward deployed sailors and Marines. In Liberia, Marines of Operation Onward Liberty, embedded as mentors to the Liberian Armed Forces. Liberia is a country not very long post-conflict, but one which has embraced democracy and transparency following almost 2 decades of civil war. And our Marines are there to help the Army be one of the protectors, their Army and their Marines be one of the protectors of that democratic system that is being so carefully built there. And one of the things that they said, which did not surprise me about our Marines, but did surprise the Liberians, was that they did a course in jungle warfare. And they said that before, they had used some other trainers. And the other trainers would tell the Liberian forces what to do when they got to the jungle, and then would get a report when they came back. The Marines went with them into the jungle, lived with them, trained with them, and did what Marines do and have the most fun doing, living hard, forward deployed. In Spain, I got to meet with the sailors and Marines of our newest carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, on its way to do combat air support over Afghanistan. Those are 2 small examples, and I know you've heard from our great CNO, Gary Ruffhead, and from George Flynn and the Marines about the incredible variety of the things that we do in the Navy and Marine Corps. I told the sailors, Marines of the Bush, that the only thing certain about their cruise, the only thing certain, was that it would not go the way it had been planned. That they would have to confront something that they had not planned for, something that they had not done a workup for, something that they had no notion was coming. No other force can do what we can do. Nobody. No other force can respond as quickly as the USS Reagan Strike Group did, going from heading to combat over Afghanistan to providing humanitarian disaster and humanitarian relief in Haiti or Japan. Nobody else can respond as quickly and as decisively to establishing a no-fly zone over Libya. We have had this ability to move from one thing to another, to be flexible, to be forward deployed, to give our nation's leaders options as to what the American response will be for 235 years now. This is the legacy of the United States Navy and Marine Corps. It's sort of like my favorite recruiting poster. It's got a carrier strike group, and the tagline is, sometimes we follow the storm to the shore, sometimes we are the storm.